Hello, everybody. Welcome to chapter 12. Um, or depending on which bio class you're in, it could be chapter 9 or chapter 8 or chapter 5 or maybe no chapter at all or all of them. But anyways, we are on now to what we call mechanisms of evolution. But before we get to that, brace yourselves because I'm in the mood to give another inspirational speech. So let's just let's just get to the meat of things. So I drink my McDonald's coffee. Actually, is not bad. I mean, it's not going to put the fine coffee roasters of America out of business or anything, but it does taste like coffee. Now, there's something else. There's a type of decaffeinated instant coffee called Senka. I don't know if they still make it, but that's like the bottom of the barrel. That is, I've given up on everything good. I'm just going to drink Senka and just make the best of it. But yeah, so McDonald's is if like Pete's coffee is, I don't know, I like Pete's. If it's at the top and Senka's on the bottom, I think like McDonald's is maybe about a third of the way up, which isn't bad for McDonald's coffee. Oh yeah, sorry. Inspirational speech. Uh, so teaching online, now this is my fourth semester teaching online, which is just like shocking because we went spring 2020 halfway through, then I taught summer, then fall, and now we're into another spring. It's crazy. But yeah, fourth semester teaching online. And I can tell you that one thing I've noticed, and this is through all the courses I teach across the board, is it is very uneven as far as the distribution of grades go. And that's because students are either like this. Well, actually, no, I can't do that. I need a graph. But it's a term that we use called bimodal distribution, meaning that the majority of the grades are either at the very bottom of the curve or the very bottom of the range or the very top of the range. So it kind of looks like a camel's humps. So so in other words, students either do really well or they achieve below what they're capable of, at least in my opinion. And it's normally seen when I teach the harder classes like physiology, because in physiology, that class will get you if you don't know exactly what you're getting into. But in a class like biology, normally this is not the case where we have a bimodal distribution, but during online learning it is. And of course, I could rack my brain all day and night and ask why that is. But I think that it kind of falls into a couple categories. One, you find online learning, the independent environment, you find it unmotivating. Understandable. I totally get it, and it's a challenge. I'm not going to try and say anything other than it is a challenge. I completely agree. Number two is that maybe this is not the best time for you to be tackling a hard class like biology, because maybe you have some things going on outside, job, family. Maybe you're trying to get your business going. Maybe you've taken a sudden interest in following your passion of making pottery. I don't know, but maybe that there's just other things you're focusing on instead of school right now. Or the third is that you just are dealing with the emotional effects of the pandemic. And really, and I've seen this in my high school students especially, is being in that, we're back in session now, which has made a big difference, but seeing them online, learning on Zoom, and just seeing how dejected they looked, just sitting in their rooms, um, being relatively isolated, and really they just looked dejected, and really I can't blame them. And I'm sure that you all out there, you're also dealing with your own your own issues, whether it's financial, whether it's family, whether it's just general feelings of malaise and loneliness. Hey, I get it. And yeah, I mean, it's something that I take very, very near and dear too, because um, before the pandemic, I was at the high school all day. Then I rushed to a college and I teach that. Then I would come home and this feel really accomplished and things like that. Wake up at 5 a.m., go to the gym. I mean, I was always busy. I felt good, and then when the pandemic hit, I was just kind of locked up in my apartment, just not doing much but talking at a computer. So yeah, I get it. Now you're probably saying, wait, I thought that this was motivating. All right, well, the thing I can tell you is that regardless of how you are enrolling in a college class, in college, it is a big jump. It is a big commitment because when you're a student, it basically is a job. You are working a second or third job. And when they say that 14 units, if that's still the case, makes you a full time student, that means full time. That means that that is like a full time job, a full time commitment. And I know it's hard at times when you are younger, when you're 18 or 19. You feel like, well, I'm used to going to school. I don't know what else to do but go to school. But you might still have that mindset that school is just something that you progress through. No, that is high school. You progress through high school to graduate. In college, your goal is to achieve. Your goal is to learn in any way that you can. And your job, your goal is to tackle the information and not only learn it, but to find value in it, to enjoy it. Because what you are learning in college is going to stick with you for the rest of your life. And it's going to influence what you end up doing as a career for the rest of your life. You might take music appreciation, which I think is music ML7, if my memory is correct, and you might discover that you have a passion for classical music. You might decide to go to school and major in the Baroque era. But yeah, I mean, these are things in college. What's amazing is that you are learning, like in biology, when we were talking about classic genetics, this is something that you learned in a week that was somebody's entire life's commitment of work. You are learning somebody's life result of work. And that's just empowering. That's just amazing. And and yeah, I'm very I get very emotional about teaching biology because you're literally learning about life. You're learning about the world around you. Why that dog over there decided to urinate on that side of the grass instead of that side of the grass, or why is it that a virus can cause a global pandemic, and why are people buying toilet paper to combat it? So these are the things that you learn. So the end of my long-winded story is that you need to do your best. And I maybe I shouldn't use say the term you need, but I strongly encourage you to put aside your distractions as much as possible and tackle your classes with a feverish intensity. And I know that sounds wrong, but a feverish intensity, a hunger for success, a hunger for achievement, because you are in college for the end goal of achieving a good life for yourself. That's right. I said a good life for yourself. You are doing this for the future you. Maybe not for you right now, but the future you. And take a moment just to think, what is it you really want to do? And how can this class help you achieve that? Because the stuff that you learn here, if you're watching the videos, which I hope you all are, the stuff you are learning here will be with you throughout your life. And I still remember even the small minor details that my college instructors taught me. Like Dr. Churosky, I think he still teaches an online class here. Brilliant professor. I attended he gave a talk about his research on the, gosh, I forget the shrimp's name, but I think it was called the pistol shrimp, and just how much power the shrimp's punch had. And I just remember sitting there like, wow, this is amazing. This guy studied shrimp and he's an expert on it. And I get to learn from him how many um, millijoules or whatever is generated by the shrimp's punch that has supersonic waves jutting from it. Yeah, I mean that's the cool stuff. So yeah, tackle the stuff with as much energy as you can muster, and do your best to make this your job to learn and succeed throughout this class. And if you're having problems, just reach out. There's always a solution. Maybe it won't take you from A to Z, but it might take you from A to C or A to E. And then by the time you get to your next semester, you already have a strong foundation to build on. So yeah, thank you for listening to this. If you did not fast forward it, which I hope you did not. But anyways, yeah, we're going to talk about something completely different. We're going to talk about more evolution. So let's go right at it. Okay, so now we're going to talk more about gene flow and more about the process of evolution and why evolution occurs the way that it does. And the first thing we're going to talk about is a concept called gene flow, which is very important for the survival of a species. So gene flow, what the general definition of this is gene flows occurs when new genes, actually when new genes, kind of combine the two words there, enter a population. When new genes enter a population. And this is very important. Genetic diversity is very important. Now, why is genetic diversity important? Well, let's take a look at the cheetah, for example. All cheetahs are basically clones of each other. There is very little genetic diversity in the cheetah populations. So there's a virus that is so impactful on cheetahs, so deadly, that it's in danger of wiping out the entire cheetah population. Because since cheetahs are basically clones of each other, this virus is affecting them all the same. So the fact that there's not much genetic diversity in the population prevents there from being cheetahs that have resistance to this virus. If that was the case, then the cheetahs would not be nearly as affected by the lack of genetic diversity. Another example, papayas. All papayas are basically genetically modified now because once again, a virus entered the papaya populations, and it was either a virus or fungus, one of those, but it was decimating them. We probably would not have papayas if we did not genetically modify them to resist that pathogen. I know I'm continuing on plants. The Irish potato famine occurred because the populations grew the potatoes that grew the biggest and the fastest and tasted the best. They felt no reason to grow any other type of potato species. Well, I believe it was a fungus came in that infected all that type of potato, resulting in famine. So you're seeing why gene flow is really important to helping a population survive. If you want to go back to our talk on Giraffe Island, think about it like this. If Giraffe Island only had bushes, and the only type of giraffe present was bulldog neck giraffe. Bulldog neck giraffe. Could you imagine seeing a giraffe that has a bulldog neck? Do you know how horrifying that would be? All right, so this is a giraffe, bulldog neck giraffe. Now, everything's fine and good as long as the environment doesn't change. But if something happens and wipes out these bushes, then the entire giraffe population would die because there's no other variants of the giraffe that could do things like eat leaves from a tree. So gene flow is really important. How does gene flow occur? Gene flow occurs when animals or when organisms immigrate into a new area. They bring genes into the population. Now, what else results in gene flow? Mutations. Mutations are random changes in the genetic code that results in new alleles. I do want to make things clear about mutations that results in new alleles. Remember, an allele is a variant of a gene. Anyways, I do want to make one thing clear about mutations. They are almost always deleterious, meaning that they almost always decrease the function of a gene. Most of the time, that's the case. Like you hear all the time about coronavirus mutations. And now we have a couple of variants like the South African variant, the Brazilian variant, the New York variant. But you're only hearing about the ones that made the virus function better. You aren't hearing about the thousands and thousands of mutations that made the virus function worse. So, mutations almost always are deleterious. However, on occasion, mutations can make new alleles that are functional. So to give you an example, you might have here a brown mouse. And a mutation might happen that makes the mouse, I don't know, maybe like a nice orange color. Or maybe you'll have a mutation that will also make it a, oh, seriously? Hold on, my wireless drawing tablet decided that it doesn't want to be wireless anymore. Everything needs to be charged, doesn't it? Even drawing tablets. But yeah, so in this case here, we had a mutation that made a new, that created a new allele that now makes this mouse more of an orangish color. Oh wait, I gotta put it in here. 1 second, me being a technology Neanderthal, I need a new allele that can teach me how to plug things in, apparently. All right, here we are. We're good to go. Yeah, so we can have a new mutation that results in a new allele of orange. So this is caused by a mutation. How do mutations occur? Either random errors in the S phase of the cell cycle, where when the DNA is copied, sometimes mistakes can happen that aren't corrected, and that can result in a change in gene function, or the environment. There are things in the environment that can cause your DNA to mutate. Usually that's not a good thing. Like, you aren't going to sprout a third arm or anything, but you could develop cancer or something similar. So anyways, mutation creates a new allele, but mutations also can do things like create albinism, which is the result of a dysfunctional gene. Can't really draw an albino mouse here. but I think you get the idea. So maybe this is going to happen. We'll just say 99.9% of the time, the random mistake will just cause the gene for making hair pigment dysfunctional. However, that 0.1% will on occasion actually change the gene in a way that allows it to function just as well, if not better. Now, this is good because let's say that this brown mouse lives in a nice brown forest. Let's say something happens and the forest turns orange. Now, the brown mouse is going to stick out like a sore thumb, and it's going to be more prone to predation, and it won't be able to hide from prey as well. Meanwhile, the orange mouse will be able to survive because it's now in an orange forest, and it will be able to resist being attacked by predators or being spotted by prey because it can blend in. So you're seeing that mutations also can cause gene flow, because now this random orange mouse is going to spread its genes throughout the population. On the other hand, we can have something called inbreeding, which is not preferred at all. So inbreeding is the opposite of what you want in a population. So what happens is that you have a lack of genetic diversity due to insufficient gene flow. You also have an increase of recessive disorders. That's because if you remember last unit, an organism can only have a recessive trait if they inherit 2 recessive alleles, one from each parent. That usually doesn't happen if the parents are very diverse from each other. But we can see it in populations where there's not much genetic diversity. So the reason why it isn't good to have individuals that are very genetically similar to reproduce is because if there's a recessive allele in that line, then it's going to continue to show up in subsequent generations. We see that actually in the white tiger population, which is actually why breeding white tigers is considered so immoral. A white tiger occurs naturally about 1 in every 10,000 Bengal tiger births. Yes, a white tiger is a Bengal tiger that has a gene mutation. So 1 in 10,000 births, somebody found a white tiger once and started to breed the white tiger with Bengal tigers until they got more white tigers. Then they started to breed them, and now you have an entire white tiger line based off the original 2 white tigers mated. Because of that, in the white tiger population, there's a lot of recessive disorders that pop up. So inbreeding makes a population more prone to extinction because if just one thing changes in the environment that is not advantageous to them, then they are going to become extinct. Like the example I showed you with the mice. If you have a brown forest, yes, everything is brown in this forest. The trees, the grass, the dirt. And you have a brown mouse here and there. Notice how well they can blend in. So if they want to sneak up on, I don't know, a worm, I know that's a big worm or something, then they'll be able to hide until it's too late for the prey to see them. And if there's a predator around, oh gosh, what can I draw as a predator? I don't know what eats mice. Maybe a hawk. There you go. Nice hawk. So this hawk is on the prowl. For some food, but it can't find the mice because they're blended in. Okay, what if something happens with the environment, maybe climate change, probably, and changes the environment so the brown forest is now a orange forest? Orange forest, orange trees, orange grass, orange trees. Now look how much things have changed. Now the hawk is going to be able to easily spot the brown mouse. And the worms are going to easily spot the mice as well because the entire forest is orange and the mice are brown. So due to the lack of genetic diversity, the mice will die. Unless there were some variants around that could blend in with the environment. And if that's the case, then the mouse population will continue to survive. I mean, it will look different, but you'll still have survival. That's why inbreeding is bad and gene flow is good. So this thing here, when recessive disorders increase in prevalence in the population, we call that an inbreeding depression. And that's a term for when recessive disorders begin to appear more in a population. All right, so now we're on to non-adaptive evolution. So first, let's talk about the opposite, adaptive evolution. Adaptive evolution. This is also known as natural selection, basically. So organisms in a population that have advantageous traits can better survive in an environment and reproduce. This is basically flexing. It's one organism flexing on another, saying, "Hey, I can survive better in this environment, so I'm going to outcompete you and have more offspring than you because I can survive better," or something like that. But on a more serious note, it's if an organism in a population, if it has an adaptation that allows it to survive better, then because it can survive better, it will be able to live long enough to have offspring. And of course, the offspring will have their traits. That is adaptive evolution. Non-adaptive evolution is basically random chance. It is just a random event that has reduced the gene pool. So in other words, adaptive evolution is a result of thousands and thousands of years of organisms in a population evolving adaptations in order to best survive in the environment. It's a slow, gradual process because remember, most new alleles are made from mutations, beneficial mutations, and it takes time for a mutation to appear that leads to an adaptation where the organism that inherits that mutation can survive better. So adaptive evolution is a result of thousands and thousands of years of evolution until the perfect organism, well, or better organism is created that can survive in an environment. Non-adaptive evolution is a bit different. This is when random events reduces genetic diversity in a population. A random event reduces genetic diversity in a population. It isn't survival of the fittest. It's more of throw your hands up and say, oh, well, stuff happens. So I do want to make it clear, non-adaptive evolution does not result in survival of the fittest. This is just something really serious happens. And certain genes or certain alleles have been wiped out from the population. So non-adaptive evolution does not choose the most fit species. Instead, it just chooses the ones that just happen to be just happen to survive. Now, there's two types of non-adaptive evolution. Actually, three. The first type is called genetic drift. This usually occurs in small populations. So what happens is that in a small population, the distribution of alleles can differ wildly. I know wildly is kind of a strong term, but basically certain alleles can disappear from a population due to, I'll just say, unfavorable probabilities. All right, so certain alleles can disappear from a population due to unfavorable probabilities. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's go back to our genetic cross here. And we're going to go ahead and do coat color. We're going to stick with our example here. We'll go ahead and say that this is an example of dominant recessive. We'll say that big A equals brown, small a equals orange. And let's say that we start with a population of 2 mice. We'll say that one is orange, which has the genotype of small a, and one is going to be brown. So it's going to have, so this is the founding population. So this is going to have a genotype of what we'll just say is going to be big A. And they reproduce and they have offspring that are all brown. All right, my mice are getting sloppier and sloppier, but you get the idea. So they have all mice that are brown, but have the genotype big A, small a. So I'll just say that they have four of these mice. another mouse. And they all have the genotype big A, small a. Now let's say that we are going to cross these mice here. And let's say that in this pairing here, they are going to reproduce. And if you remember the outcome of a cross between two heterozygotes, it's basically a 3-to-1 distribution of the dominant versus the recessive phenotype. But we do know there's a 25% chance that the recessive allele can become prevalent. Well, in the short term, probability can vary wildly. And each time these two mice have offspring, there's a 25% chance that they'll have a brown mouse. Okay, well, let's say that they have 4 offspring, and it just happens that 3 of them are small a, which definitely has beaten the odds, and 1 of them is going to be big A, small a. Now let's say in this mouse pairing, remember once again, 25% chance, but let's say they also beat the odds. Now, if we look here, due to random chance, we see that we have a much bigger population of the orange mice than what would be expected with probability. Very similar as if you were to flip a coin 3 or 5 times, you could have all the outcomes come out heads or tails. Even though the probability is 50-50, in the short term, you can have wild variance. So what's going to happen here is that now the recessive allele is so prevalent in the population, following this pattern, the dominant allele is going to be weeded out from the population. So what has happened is that in genetic drift is that the frequency of alleles can change from one generation to the next. So this usually reduces the gene pool. Now next is called the founder effect. Founder effect. And this occurs when a small segment of a population leaves and resettles elsewhere. This is a problem for a couple of reasons. One, it reduces gene pool of original population, and also new population has limited gene pool. So both populations have been affected, the existing one and the new one. So what can happen here, for example, is you can have a population of, I'll just say, dark red giraffes and pink giraffes. And something can happen where these two giraffes decide to leave and settle elsewhere. So they are going to found a new population or find a new population. Because of that, the starting population has fewer genes. So it's actually lost some of the genes. Well, I shouldn't say lost, but it has had the frequency changed which is going to reduce genetic diversity. And then the new population is going to have low genetic diversity because, as you can see, they don't have the pink phenotype here. The founder effect is deleterious because usually there's lots of inbreeding in populations that were started through the founder effect, and there's several populations where within their population, within their ethnic group, there's a high prevalence of recessive disorders because they are the product of a population that was based on the founder effect. Now the next is a bottleneck effect, and this is just flat out unfair. That's the best way that I can put it. So a bottleneck effect is a disaster changes the frequency of alleles in the population. Alleles in a population. Results in lack of genetic diversity. There's lots of examples we can use. One of my favorites is an example of how we have all these beetles in a population. Like, so we have brown beetles, and then we have green beetles, and some businessman comes and he's in a hurry, and he steps he steps and wipes out a large portion of the beetle population. So what has happened is that a natural disaster has drastically changed the frequency of the alleles. Now the brown phenotype, which was the most common, now has been extremely reduced, and now the green phenotype is the dominant phenotype. Now that isn't always good because the brown beetle was the most populous because it had the best chance of surviving in the environment. A random natural disaster now has reduced the population of the brown beetles, and now the green ones are the only ones left. If they are not capable of surviving well in their environment, then the population period will be extremely reduced. Because now the most common type of beetle is the one that does not have the greatest chance of living or existing in the environment. This is just randomness. This is just a random thing happened where the large part of the beetle population just got wiped out. It's one of those things. Stuff happens. If you want another example, we can go back to Giraffe Island. It's kind of the example that I did earlier, or last unit. So we have trees because Giraffe Island. And then we have bushes. And then accordion of trees. And it's like, okay, well, what if the medium neck giraffe was the most common because they're the most medium trees? Well, if something happened to these medium trees, then all of a sudden the medium giraffe population would be decimated because now there's only bushes and accordion trees. The medium neck giraffe would not be able to survive now because a natural disaster wiped out their main source of food. It's one of those things. Things change. You can adapt. So see ya. But of course, that's going to reduce genetic diversity because now you've lost the medium-necked giraffe. So it's going to become much less common in the environment. All right, now there's two types of evolution, and it's very important we talk about them. One is called divergent evolution. This is real evolution because it results in something called speciation, which is creation of a new species from an existing species. So what happens here is that you can have species 1, and over time, it's going to incur random mutations until eventually you are going to have species 2. Species 2. And do you know what? Maybe another species diverges from this 2, so you can have species 3. So what happened is that species 1 is the original species. Random mutations happened that took species 1, and it became eventually 2 separate species, species 2 and species 3. But this is called divergent evolution because new species diverge from existing species. So this is real evolution. Convergent evolution is much different. So with convergent evolution, environment allows for a narrow phenotype for survival to occur. Let's look at birds, for example. So if birds want to fly, so let's put down requirements for flying. They must be relatively small. They must have wings. They must have webbed feet. I don't know. Webbed feet to grab. But actually, I think webbed feet isn't probably the best one. I'll just put down. I'll just put on scaly feet, I guess, to grab things. Light bones. And a diverse diet, because who knows where they'll fly and who knows where they'll find food. And also ability to lay eggs, because it's very hard to fly if you're trying to internally incubate young. Now, the reason why I say this is because with convergent evolution, you see birds and you might think, oh, all these birds have a head, or a relatively small head. Most of them have a beak. Most of them, or they all have wings. They all have feathers. They all have scaly feet. They all have light bones. So you might say they're all related. That's not the case. It's more like they have to have all of these qualities if they want to fly. Therefore, everything that is a that we call a bird may not be genetically similar. They could be genetically different. They could have no common ancestors, but they just look alike. It's kind of it kind of goes in line with what's called the doppelganger effect. Some of you have probably heard of it. Doppelganger effect. I think that's how you spell it. So basically, people that look alike are assumed to be related. That is not always the case. There's some people that can look very similar that are not even in the same ethnic group. There's something on YouTube where two young women did look pretty similar. I want to say they were twins, like how they were trying to play it up in the video, but they could definitely pass as sisters, very close sisters. And when they did the 23andMe test, it turned out that they weren't even close to being related. So everything that you see that is a bird, it isn't because they are from they diverged from the same ancestor. It's because with evolution, they had to evolve in a way to have all these requirements, or else they could not fly. That's just it. Think of it like airplanes from, well, like airplanes from different manufacturers, Airbus, Boeing, I don't know. But you can look and see that they all more or less look the same, because that's the only thing, that's the only way you can build a plane that will have it fly. I mean, you can't have a plane on the side that you're going to build like a brick and attach a propeller to the back and have it, be a new technology. It's just not going to work. So convergent evolution is species randomly evolve to have a similar physical appearance, but that doesn't mean that they're related at all. So convergent evolution is not speciation. All right, so now we're going to talk about something called sexual selection. And this is a very interesting thing. So sexual selection. I joke around with my high school students that, like, for example, whenever they see a teenage boy that's, I don't know, dressing like the style, I don't know, has the Beats headphones, has the cool hoodie on, I don't know, the Nikes shoes, I don't know, has a cool hairstyle going, that's going to be much more appealing than the guy walking around unkempt hair, a shirt that has holes in it, um, texting on his Nokia from 1999 that isn't appealing as someone to go out on a date with. So humans, we also have there's also this thing in the human populations of sexual selection. And what this is that physical characteristics and behaviors increase chances of reproducing. So I'll give you an example. Well, there's several examples. One of my favorite is the birds of paradise. And these are birds that actually, they have to do a certain dance for the female. And if the dance isn't perfect, then the female bird will just fly away. I know, harsh. So let me see if I can find it. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting video that kind of shows sexual selection in action. But so let's look up birds of paradise mating dance. Here we go. This one is good. Yes, the famous David Attenborough. Never disappoints. Okay, I don't really want to watch an ad. Sorry, YouTube. No, sorry. Wait, I think I have to share the. I have to make sure I put on optimize for video. Okay. No, I want to optimize for video. Okay, cool. Birds of paradise. Let's do it.
Changes as you descend, becoming ever darker and damper, favouring different kinds of animals and plants. Less than 2% of the sunlight reaches the floor, but even here there is extraordinary variety. In the great island of New Guinea, there are 42 different species of birds of paradise, each more bizarre than the last. This forest is so rich that nourishing food can be gathered very quickly. That leaves the male six-plumed bird of paradise with time to concentrate on other matters, like tidying up his display area. Everything must be spick and span. All is ready. Very impressive, but no one is watching. The superb bird of paradise calls to attract a female. And he has more luck. But what does he have to do to really impress her? She retires to consider her verdict. It's hard not to feel deflated when even your best isn't good enough.
I know, harsh. But that's an example of sexual selection in action. You're seeing that the male had to do a certain set of behaviors and had to have a certain physical appearance in order to be attractive to the female bird. And really, if you think about it, the females in a species, they select who mates with them. So what they desire goes in a population. For example, peacocks, the bigger the feathers, the more appealing that bird is to mate. Yeah, one of my favorite sayings in the animal kingdom is he chased her and she caught him. Which, if you think about it, is that yes, the male has to do the majority of the work, but when the female chooses, then she accepts him. Well, that's kind of the thing with sexual selection, is that she chooses which male has the best characteristics to mate with her, because of course the goal of reproduction is to have genetically fit species, to have the offspring be as genetically fit as possible. And for whatever reason, the female birds in the species that we just saw decided that male birds that could dance the best and look the most pristine, I guess, had the best traits needed to make successful offspring. Now, this also results in something called sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism. And what this means is that the males and females of a species, males and females of a species look different. As you saw in there, the female bird of paradise did not look nearly similar, or did not look similar at all to the male of the species. And that's because they don't have to. The male's job is to impress the female, not the other way around. It's kind of like when they say that the CEO in a meeting is usually the guy that's dressed in like um, in an untucked collar shirt and like jeans. That's because he has nothing to prove. He runs the company. He doesn't need to impress anyone. All right, so now we're going to talk about types of selection. So types of natural selection. And these are models. These are models that basically determine how evolution occurs. So types of natural selection. And they usually follow one of three paths. One is called directional, which means that the most common phenotype switches, well, actually, most common phenotype becomes less common due to change. But it still exists in the population, just is not as common. Next is what's called stabilizing. And this is how should I put this? So stabilizing selection is narrow range of a trait required for survival. So by narrow range, I mean like there is an ideal phenotype and it just can't shift much from that phenotype. So basically, there's one phenotype that is successful, and variance from that will decrease the chances of surviving. And last one is called disruptive. Is disruptive, and what this is major change, usually a natural disaster of some sort, causes the outliers to become more common. To become more common. So some kind of disaster is caused, and because of that, the outliers in the population become more common. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about directional first. So once again, in directional selection, environmental change, usually environmental change causes a less common phenotype to become more common. So let's say in a population we have, so we'll say X is going to be group, Y is going to be numbers, group. So let's say that we have in a forest, let's say we have bright green. Actually, let me do it in the color that it is. So let's say for the color of moths, we have bright green, then we have black, well, actually dark green, and then we have black. And let's say the forest is this color here. So this is what the forest looks like. It's dark green, therefore it makes sense that green moths would have the best chance to survive. They can blend in with the environment, hide from predators, and they can sneak up on prey. Now we see here that bright green moths and black moths, yeah, they can survive, but not in as large of numbers. So we're going to say that the curve is going to look like this. Now, let's say that a factory is built not too far from the forest. And the ash and soot that results from burning the coal lands onto the forest and turns it a very darker grayish area. So it covers it with ash and it becomes darker and grayer. Because of this now, something has changed with the environment. The environment is now darker and more ashen. So what's going to happen here is that the green beetle is not going to be able to survive. And now the dark green beetle will be able to survive, but it isn't as good of a phenotype. It isn't as successful of a phenotype as the black moths. So the curve is going to shift to the right like this. So we see that the curve is changing directions. It's just moving to the right. So in the new forest, yes, the dark green beetle can still survive, but now the most advantageous phenotype is the black moth. And the bright green moth cannot survive anymore because the forest is way too dark, and the green moth will just stick out and won't be able to get prey and will get easily hunted by predators. Now the next is going to be what we call stabilizing selection. Stabilizing selection. And this is a very specific trait, must be present, must be present. Variance is not well tolerated. There's several of examples here. Let me think of one. We can go ahead and say birth weight. This is a good one. So birth weight. I don't know the proper birth weights, but I'll just say here, we'll say that 4 pounds. So I'll do weight in pounds. And then the y-axis is going to be numbers. Let's say we have 4 pounds, 7 pounds, and 10 pounds. Now let's say in the population, it starts off as being like this. So yes, there's a decent number of 4 pounds, decent number of 7, mostly 7 pounds, and a small number of 10 pounds. Okay, here's the problem. Now, 7 pounds actually is the ideal phenotype. It is the most ideal variation. So it's going to look like this. Actually, even more narrow than that. Now, why is that? Well, if a baby is too underweight, on the plus side is the mother, and we're speaking about caveman times, the mother would be better able to run from predators and catch prey. So on the plus side, the mother will be more mobile. On the minus side is babies born premature. They don't have all of their organs developed, and they have a very poor outcome for survival. Thankfully, modern medical technology has increased the odds or the chances of premature babies surviving, thankfully. Now, if the baby is too heavy, on the plus side is the baby will have had more time to develop, and in theory, it will be born better able to fend for itself. Okay, not human babies, but I'm just giving an example. On the minus side is the mother will be so weighed down with, well, baby, that she won't be as mobile, may not be able to run from predators or catch prey. Plus, well, a baby that's that big would not be able to be birthed naturally. Well, at least not with significant trauma caused to the mother. However, 7 pounds is about perfect because the mother still is able to be relatively mobile, and the baby will be born just big enough for all of its organs to be developed. So that's why almost all babies born falls in a very narrow range of size, because about 7 pounds is going to be the best phenotype, the best outcome for survival. And the last one is going to be what we call disruptive. And in disruptive selection, major change occurs. Major change occurs that causes outliers to become more common. Let's do an example of moths again. So in a population, we are going to have black moths. We're going to have brown moths, and then we're going to have bright green moths. Let's say the forest happens to be bright green. Now, of course, bright green moths are going to be the most common because they get best blended in with the environment. Excuse me, sorry. And yes, maybe the population can support a small number of black and brown moths, but not nearly as many. So this is going to be how the population looks right now. However, let's say that some disaster happens, maybe a volcano, I don't know, and covers this forest with ash. Well, now what has happened is that since this forest is now covered in ash, bright green moths are now going to be too visible now in the newly changed forest. So it is going to be basically wiped out of the population. And instead, the darker moths, which were normally the outliers, they're going to slowly become the most common moth because they'll be able to best survive in the population. So it's going to look like this. You see that the outliers are now the most prevalent, and the phenotype that was most common is now relatively rare. So that is disruptive. The main phenotype or the primary phenotype actually becomes less advantageous and reduces it in numbers. And the secondary or the phenotypes that were the outliers, not as likely to survive, suddenly become more likely. So I hope you all enjoyed this lecture. We got a lot covered, some very interesting stuff, and I'll see you all back for chapter 13. See you soon.